Welcome to Imagine Otherwise, the podcast about the people and projects bridging art, activism, and academia to build better worlds. Episodes offer in-depth interviews with creators who use culture for social justice and explore the nitty-gritty work of imagining otherwise. I'm your host, Kathy Hanneback. Imagine Otherwise is produced by Ideas on Fire, an academic editing and consulting agency helping progressive, interdisciplinary scholars create awesome work. This week's episode is brought to you by our Grad School Rockstar program and Dissertation Rockstar Bootcamp. Enrollment just opened for fall 2016. Both of these programs help progressive, interdisciplinary scholars, like those featured in this podcast, create awesome work, build accountability and community, and rock their interdisciplinary careers. If you or someone you know is a grad student who wants to create a regular writing routine, stop drowning in email, prioritize self-care, and finish their dissertation along with other social justice-oriented scholars, you can go to gradschoolrockstars.com to find out more. So this is episode 16, and my guest today is Katie Manthey. Thanks so much for being with us, Katie.
Hi.
So you're the creator of Dress Profesh. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that project?
Sure. So Dress Profesh started as a way for me to procrastinate finishing my dissertation. I was a PhD student in rhetoric and writing, specifically focusing on cultural rhetorics. And I was writing about how self-identified fat fashion bloggers make meaning through their clothing, their dress practices, in ways that are rhetorical, material, and embodied. And at the same time, I was on the job market. And I had a lot of really good mentoring where we would workshop materials and talk about strategies for travel. And we would also talk about what to wear to job interviews, like campus visits. And I found this to be a really interesting rhetorical moment. So as someone who studies rhetoric as systems of power and culture and how the two are connected, this advice was really, it really stuck out to me. So I was on fellowship and I was at home doing most of my writing, wearing PJs and not taking a shower and not wearing a bra. And at the same time, I was making my materials for the job market. So I was being very professional. And that tension kind of, I'm like, well, I want to explore this more. So I started taking a picture every day, like a What I Wore Today blog, which is something that I've been interested in for a long time since it was part of my dissertation research and just part of my everyday life. So I started posting pictures every day on Tumblr of what I wore when I was working, always dressed down, to kind of highlight how, it doesn't really matter what I wear when I do this sort of work. And my friends on Facebook saw it and started sending me pictures. And so then this way of keeping track of things kind of became an interactive gallery. And then it sort of blew up. And so I am still, it's always changing, and I'm working to make it more clear kind of what the purpose is. So it says on there, kind of the motto is, what does it even say? Challenging notions of what it means to look professional, body positive, no hate allowed. And it kind of works from the premise that all dress codes are inherently racist, cis-sexist, sizist, classist, ageist, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I kept posting pictures of myself while I was working, and people who had different types of jobs would submit things with as much text as they wanted. And I would post them, and I started posting, it was on Tumblr, and then cross-posted to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And then it sort of blew up, and we got signal boosted by some big people. And today there are about 13,000 followers for the Tumblr site.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. It got big.
One of the things that I really am intrigued by about this kind of interactive gallery, this website, is the broad range of what counts as professionalism, right? Mm-hmm. What, both what we actually wear when we do our work, but then also the kind of political bent of challenging who gets to decide what counts as professionalism, particularly yes. as those norms are filtered through the kind of violences that you named, right?
Yes.
And it's a fascinating site in that sense. And I also see that there's kind of links or to articles or notes about current events in addition to the kind of daily professional photos, right?
Hmm.
Very cool. So, just to kind of expand on that a little bit, why fashion? And why fashion, particularly in relationship to professionalism? Why is that a useful lens through which to examine various oppressions like fat phobia, capitalism, misogyny, the whole gamut?
Right. Um, so fashion, I think, is a useful kind of way in to these things because it's part of everyday life. And so it really depends, especially as someone who does cultural rhetorics work, to define all of your terms, right? So what exactly is fashion and how is that different than just everyday dress? I kind of use the two synonymously. And when I talk about dress, I talk about like Joanne Eicher's definition of dress practices in The Visible Self, where she explains that it's like any body modification that creates meaning in a society that gives meaning to those practices. I make that sound tautological, but it's not. um, but kind of working from the idea that any body modification that affects the five senses, so that could be things like clothing, but it's also things like your hair and smell and body fat. So like gaining weight or losing weight, or wearing clothes that like manipulate your shape a certain way, like especially shapewear. So when I talk about like fashion, I mean things. I mean two different things. I mean dress practices, and I know that that gets a little bit conflated, but also then like the specific things that exist under a capitalist kind of umbrella where all of these practices are for sale, right?
Mm.
So, um, like in the dissertation work, the thing that the moment that this project kind of comes out of, like no one that I talked to made their own clothes. Everyone buys clothes, and where you buy them from, is deeply tied to class and access, and then building parts of your identity through the things that you're able to purchase or not purchase, depending on how much money you have and what size you are and where you live in the world. So fashion as a way kind of into this, like dress practices as a way in, I think can be really useful because people, for better or worse, get dressed every day. So it's a way to kind of bring this critical lens to an everyday practice. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it resonates really interestingly with actually the person we interviewed on the very first episode of the Imagine Otherwise podcast, Minhati
Yes.
Pham, who also writes about fashion and specifically the racialized, gendered politics of fashion, both
Yes.
the wearing of clothes, as you're mentioning, but also the production of clothes and what does it mean when we start to kind of look at the bodies that produce the clothes versus wear the clothes, especially when those bodies are often racialized similarly.
Yes.
In her example, she's looking at Asian American fashion bloggers who are wearing very kind of high end top brands and things like that. But then also putting those bodies alongside the largely low income Asian workers who are making those garments, right?
Yes.
So it's an interesting kind of parallel here, and both
Yeah.
of you are kind of articulating the profound complexity of identity work through dress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really admire her work too, by the way. Yeah.
So you also have a book coming out about fat fashion bloggers and kind of how they navigate both the personal style blogosphere, but also how they intervene in kind of systems of violence. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that book.
Yeah. So the book is exactly what you were talking about. It kind of takes the stuff that I worked on in the dissertation and turns it a little bit more out. So it's not just focused on academia. My editor and I were talking about trying to engage what she called the educated public. And that's one thing that like dress profesh that makes it so important is that it's not just academic work for academics to read. That this is something kind of like both within the academy and beyond. So it's intellectual activist work. Um, and yeah, so the book expands on three different interviews with self-identified fat fashion bloggers in three different countries, the UK, America, and Portugal, and talks with them about how they kind of like came to realize that they were fat, and then how they found online communities as kind of a way to express and find how to live in this body. And then those online communities always had clothes as part of this. And so then this kind of play became more than just something esoteric or something frivolous, like what you put on your body, that it's actually like a way to radically like live in the world, to be okay with your body in a society that says that you have to be a different way, can be radical. And then how the blogs, so they all started blogs after reading other blogs, and then how they've kind of become resources or mentors for other people who are coming to body positivity in different ways. Yeah, and always the punchline being capitalism, and when they get corporate sponsorship in different ways, how activism becomes advertising, and then how advertising can then again become something that like calls for activism. Yeah.
Interesting. It seems like certainly this is a project that comes out of fat studies, or is it very much
Yes.
in conversation with that field,
Yes.
but also takes it in a different direction, right? Through the focus on fashion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I explain the work that I do, I usually say that I do cultural rhetorics, fat studies, and dress studies. So it's kind of a unique overlap on the Venn diagram of theory and academic study.
For sure. How do you see your work combining activism, art, and academia?
Oh, well, it goes back to what I was saying about how like the importance of finding interventions into critical thinking and dismantling systems of power through everyday life. So the art, I think, is kind of there with how dress can be like an artistic form of expression. Um, and it really, dress profesh sits at that intersection exactly of all of those things, the academia, art, and activism, because it says, when I, as someone who is employed by an institution to teach other people, when I decide that I am going to shave half of my head, as I did recently, and dye the other half purple, and then go onto campus and teach people, that decision to do those things with my body, that it doesn't just change the way that I teach, it changes the way that people read me. So yeah, the art, academia, and activism, all in service of social justice. Yeah, the everyday life, the way that an online gallery like this kind of circulates, how the pictures and posts can move between platforms, and are accessible to people, especially in a visual culture. But again, this sort of like also assumes a certain level of access to technology and certain literacy.
Sure. So, one of the things that I like to talk with people about is collaboration. And obviously, Dress Profesh is a deeply collaborative project. I mean, you run it, but the photos that people upload and the ways that the arguments and the images circulate are through these extensive networks that you've built over time, that 13,000 community members strong that you mentioned. So, what are some of your favorite people or communities to collaborate with, and why, either through Dress Profesh or in your other various endeavors?
Um, Really anyone who wants to participate. Like part of this being like maintaining the integrity of the project means that it's open to everyone to express in a way that works for them. The only thing that I sort of like monitor is hate. So if a post has like negative body talk or things like shamey about like what other people are wearing, or something, like if it's oriented in a way to do harm, then I'll talk to the person. I'll usually send them a message and be like, hey, I really want to post this. I was a little concerned about like some of the language this way. I'm wondering if we could talk more about it. for all the posts that I've had in the, like, I think it's a little over a year that the site has been up, there have been maybe only like 2 or 3 where I've felt that I wasn't comfortable just immediately posting. And I think that some of that is just sort of like the way that the site is. So the people who find the site are mostly, I think, probably people who are looking for ways to think critically about what they wear. Usually people who have been hurt in some way by some sort of like norming of their body and appearance. And most people are very respectful. But yeah, I'm interested in basically publishing and working with anyone who's interested in sharing their story in whatever way that looks like. And the other thing that I don't know if it's quite clear on there too is that if at any time someone wants their post taken down, I will absolutely do that in every way possible, because I think that agency with images and pictures is really important, and people are being vulnerable when they post pictures of themselves, especially in ways that might challenge the status quo at places that they work if they are identified.
Do you have any future plans for the blog?
Well, I was thinking about kind of revamping it, like making it more clear that it isn't necessarily about what people wear. It's about how they wear it, or the context that they're wearing it in, and how every type of thing that you can do with your body can be a radical subversive act. As far as other projects with it, I'm doing an installation at an academic conference at the end of May. At Computers and Writing in Rochester, New York. And I might be doing a couple more during the year where I'm going to ask academics who attend the conference to like take pictures on the spot and then post them to Dress Profesh, because to get teachers, especially writing teachers, kind of thinking about what they wear in the classroom can be a really interesting moment. Oftentimes academics get feedback on student evals about appearance, especially women will get comments. And so kind of like opening the door to talking explicitly about this can be really useful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this brings me to my favorite question that I get to ask people. And so this podcast is obviously called Imagine Otherwise. And what I am really excited to talk with people about is their version of a better world, that world that they're working towards when they create whatever amazing thing it is that they create. So I'll ask you, what's the world that you're working towards? What world do you want?
Yes. So like pie in the sky, ideal world.
Go big, go big.
It would be one where it doesn't matter what you wear. And so it's not this one where appearance doesn't matter, because I think that appearance and dress practices can be very pleasurable. Like there can be a lot of power and a lot of fun and a lot of play for certain people at certain times, in certain contexts, like with what they wear, but that people would actually be judged by who they are and the work that they do instead of how they look. And it sounds cliche, but like the things that many of us are told growing up, like it's what's on the inside that counts, like that would actually be true. I joke that I would like to be able to wear like Harry Potter robes to campus every day. I mean, they were kind of onto something back then. It's warm.
It's true. And comfy.
Exactly. And that it wouldn't matter if I did that it truly, honestly wouldn't matter, because then I think we're untangling these knots of systemic oppression in a way that would free us up to do other things. Yeah.
Well, I think that is a great way to end with that image. So thank you so much for being on this podcast. And I'll be sure to put links in the show notes to Dress Profesh, your personal website, and all the kind of projects and authors that you mentioned here. But thank you so much.
Great. Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Imagine Otherwise. Be sure to check out our website at imagineotherwise.com to listen to full episodes, read show notes, and see links to the people, books, and projects discussed on the show. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes.